Hey, and welcome back to another Learning Java 2D game programming video. So in our last video, we implemented the random object into our game so that now we can give it a seed and it will generate the exact same maps every single time given that seed. So that's great and all, but we don't have a way of entering the seed into our game, and that's a little boring, right? That's a little sad. So we can't really use it properly currently. So that's what we're gonna be fixing today. We are gonna be making an input UI component. And that means we're gonna need some new functionality that we don't have. So let's jump right on that. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to head over to the input class. And here I want to store sort of like a little buffer, a collection of which keys did we recently type since the last time we read it, or since the last update, since you might be faster than the update time. So this doesn't listen at the same rates as what we've capped our game updates, right? It has its own thread. So therefore, we're going to keep a list of integers, and I'm going to call it like typed key buffer. So the keys that you've typed since, well, the last time or the last update, possibly. So let's just initialize that in this input. There we go. And to make it easy for ourselves, I'm going to, first of all, we're going to clean this up in this cleanup mouse events. And we're going to change the name of this since now that's not entirely true. But here we want to do typed key buffer clear, so that it doesn't just add on things that we've typed, and whenever we activate something that can listen to things that we've typed, that it just sort of gets everything in our history. That's not what we want. So we want to actually clear it every update. And since this no longer contains only mouse events, I'm going to rename it Shift F6. I'm going to say clear input events. So both the mouse events and the typed key buffer. All right. So as I said before I got sidetracked, to make it easy for ourselves, we're just going to put this inside of the key released method. I mean, maybe you'd want to get the functionality that you have in input fields that it gives you one letter as soon as you press down, and then you hold for a second, and then it just starts spamming stuff. We could have that, but it takes more code, more functionality, and let's do the simplest thing first that'll give us value, which means I'm just going to use this key released. So typed key buffer add e get key code. So we've added what key code we released. And then we're going to need getters. Let's do a getter for the typed key buffer. And hopefully that's enough. I think so. Let's just close that out for now. And I'm going to handle this the same way that I used for the mouse that has a mouse consumer. For now, we're not going to do an entire handler and everything. So I'm just going to put it in the top input package. I'm going to call this a key input consumer. Add, and this was supposed to be an interface. I clicked a little fast. All right, so this is just gonna have one method, and it's gonna be on key pressed, which takes an int key. Okay, so this is our key input consumer. It's gonna work sort of the same way as our mouse consumer. I'm just gonna close that off. So now let's go to our state so that we can handle when we click something. So right now we have this mouse handler update, And in this state, we don't have anything that handles input. So we've put that in the game state class and where we needed it then. But I feel like this is some kind of support that we want from everywhere. So I'm going to start by making a private method that I'm going to call handle key input. So I'm just going to call handle key input. And then let's create this method. And it's a private void, sure. So now we need to store a key input consumer because I want to check, first of all, if the key input consumer, which we don't have yet, is not null. Then I would like to do something like for int key code inside of the input get typed key buffer, do key input consumer dot on key pressed key code. And if not, let's just allow our state to handle key input. So I'm going to do handle input, and we have this in our game state, and now we're going to have it in all our states. So I'm going to make that an abstract method, which means that all of our states need to implement this. But let's fix the key input consumer first. So up here, I'm going to keep a key input consumer there. And let's see, does it have to be anything at first? I don't think it has to. So I think this is fine. We're going to need a getter and setter for it. For the key input consumer, there we go. There we are. I think we are done in here for now. Now let's just check which states got really sad, such as the score state. Just implement handle input, and it's fine that we're doing nothing inside it for these states. The menu state as well. I think the game state will be fine because it actually has a method called handle input. But maybe we want to put the override annotation on it. As you could see, it wasn't complaining, so it only gives you a warning, but it still works. All right, and then the editor state, which also needs to implement this. There we go. Now all the states should be happy. I'm just going to close out of that. All right, so now that we have handled this, let's make our UI component. And I'm gonna just create a new package because maybe we want one type of input for text, one type of input for numbers, one type of input that is like a, if you think about web development, you have these sort of area inputs that are much larger. I don't know yet, but I'm still gonna make a package just in case, and I'm gonna call it key, maybe key input, no text input, or just input, really. And if we were to be following web development convention, then probably the UI checkbox would end up in there as well in the input package. But I'm gonna disregard that for now, and we can move it later if we decide that it's the best thing. But let's make our text input component, and I'm gonna call it UI text input. All right, so this will extend UI clickable because we need to be able to click it to make it active, but also it will implement key input consumer. So let's implement all of the things. So we get on key pressed from key input consumer, and then the on focus, on click, on drag, on release, get sprite from the UI clickable. So first of all, what is it that we really need to store in here in the UI text input? Well, whatever value we are editing through this input, we need to be able to access that from the outside as well, from wherever we are creating this input. So probably from like one of the UI classes of a state where we build sort of these forms, the menu and all of that. So we want both of those to be able to point to the same value, and we have something that does this for us. A wrapper around, well, anything really, but we use it mainly for our primitives, right? So that they can point to the same value. So I want to reuse this, but then I don't want it to be called setting anymore. So I'm going to start by renaming it. And I couldn't think of a good name, so I'm just going to call it value for now. And sure, let's rename stuff to value. And then I'm just going to move this to the core package. So just press refactor. So that should be all for that. And you can see we were using it in the UI checkbox as well. So there we are. So in here, now we want to keep a private final value string. And I'm going to call this the value. All right, so let's alt insert and make a constructor. So we need to take in the value, but also I'm going to take in the label. So I'm going to have a label which comes with this input. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do, which we often do, is I'm going to set the margin to 0 and the padding as well. So now this is just a UI clickable. We need to keep the graphics in here somehow, and we're going to create it in the same way that we made our button. We're going to keep some containers and stuff inside of here and then pretend like those are actually this component. So for that, I'm going to keep a container that I'm just going to call container. So this is the one that will act as our container, which means that, for example, on getSprite, I'm going to say container.getSprite. So there we go. I want my input field to have a border, but we have not implemented a way of setting a border for our containers, which means that we have to cheat a little bit. So actually, I'm just going to make a wrapping container, which just has a 2-pixel padding and a different color. I'm also going to keep one container that I'm going to call border container. So that's just going to be the border. So this might be like light gray, and then the container that actually has the text and the input will be dark gray. And this will just be a 2-pixel padding, so it's going to look like a border. So that's a way that we can cheat. And so I'm going to have the border container, and then I'm going to have the content container. So let's make the border container. It's going to be a new vertical container. And then let's just set the padding to a new spacing of 2 and set margin to a spacing of 0. And then for this content container, let's make that a horizontal container. So I'm first going to do set center children to true. I'm going to say set margin to a spacing of 0. I'm going to say set background color, and I'm going to start with dark gray. And then I'm going to set a fixed size to a new size of 200 by 30. And we need to import size. And I think that's it. So let's add this content container to the border container first. And then let's create the overall wrapping container. So that's going to be a new vertical container. This container is going to have a margin of 0 and a padding of 0. And then let's first add a label container. So a new UI text just a text component with this label string that we passed in. And then let's add our border container. So now I think we've set it all up properly. So we're going to need to do stuff when we press on the key. So this is where the magic's going to happen, but we're also going to do some stuff in the update method. So let's override the public void update state. So what is it that we really want to do here? Well, I'm going to first say super update with this state, but then the container, which we are using as our own, basically, as our graphics, we need to update that, and we need to take on the size of this container as well. Get size. So let's see, let's get a border color, and let's make that gray by default. So now let's check if this current text input is the active one inside of our state. So if state get key input consumer, first of all, isn't null, otherwise it's going to be very sad if it is. And the get key input consumer equals this. All right, so the current input that we're inside is now the active input in the state. That means we want our border color not to be gray, but instead to be maybe white or light gray. Do we want light gray or white? I'm going to start with light gray. All right, so now we said that our color is light gray. Let's just set the border container, set background color to this border color. So that should be good. Now moving on to the on key pressed. First of all, I'm just going to unwrap the value so it's easier to work with. So I'm going to say current value is equal to value dot get value, and maybe that's a little. I'm just going to say shift F6, and I'm just going to say get for now. So value dot get. I feel like it's unnecessary to say value get value. So now we want to check specific keys. So for example, if this key is equal to key event vk backspace, which is the erase button. So first of all, if this is the case, we need to check if the current value is not empty. So if it's not empty, I'm just going to say current value is equal to current value substring 0 to current value dot length -1. So we're just removing 1. So we're going to make this really simple for ourselves in this first iteration, and we're not going to allow the cursor to be anywhere but at the end of our string. So of course, it's a very nice to have feature to be able to move your cursor and do cool stuff, but it will also take time to develop that. So it will come later. We're going to do the smallest thing that brings us value. So we're not doing anything of cursors and indices of the cursor or whatever. We're just always going to say that the cursor is at the end of our string. So when we press backspace, we just take away 1 from the end of our string. All right, so that is good. Also, I'm going to say else if this key is equal to key event vk space. So if we have a space, let's just tag on a space. And else. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. We have a method from the key event, which is getKeyText, given a key code. The problem with this key text is it doesn't, for example, for space, it doesn't automatically just give us a space. Instead, the key text is going to give us a string that says space, which isn't very helpful to us. So that's why I'm remapping it like this for this key. But that means it does this for all keys. Like if you press shift, it's going to give you the string shift. So therefore, we're going to make it easy for ourselves. And I'm going to say string key text is equal to that. And then we're going to check if key text length is equal to 1. So if the key that we pressed gives us a string that only has the length 1, we pressed like either we pressed a letter or we pressed a number or whatever, then that's going to be passed through. But if we press anything that says shift or control or whatever, that will not get passed through. So I'm going to just say current value plus equals key text. All right, and after we've done all this, I'm going to say value, set value, current value. And then I'm going to do content container dot clear. And then I'm going to re-add this value right here. I really want to call it inner container. I'm not sure why. Add UI component, new UI text, and I'm going to give it the current value. So like that. And we need a way to also set this as the active key input consumer. And of course, we do that in the onClick method. So in this onClick, I'm just going to say state set key input consumer this. All right, great. Now we need to try to use this UI text input somewhere. So I'm just going to check for time. Ooh, use 22 minutes. All right, let's make a quick little form in the menu UI. I'm going to make a new Java class, and I'm going to call it the UI game mode menu or UI game. Sure, game mode menu. We can change it later. So it's going to extend vertical container. And here we need to define that this value that we want to pass in and then change. So I'm going to call this seed. That's what we're going to want to enter here eventually. I'm going to do a constructor. So we're not going to take that in, but we're going to create that a new value. It needs an initial value. I'm just going to give it an empty string. Let's set this up. So first of all, I want the alignment to be centered. And center again. So center, center. Now, I'm not sure how I'm going to do it exactly. I'm going to have a label like I have for the options. I haven't decided how I want my different menus to look, the UI exactly. I haven't decided on a look. So we're going to try out different things. And once we're happy, we're going to make everything look the same. But for here, I am not going to have the dark gray background. I'm instead going to keep it transparent. But I'm going to still have a label maybe. Do I want to have a label? No. We're also pressed for time. Let's skip the label for now. We can add it later. But I'm going to just have a content container, and that's going to be a vertical container. Let's do set margin to 0 and set padding to 0. All right. Now let's, in this content container, add our new UI, what do we call it? Text input, UI text input. So I'm gonna give it the label seed and the seed value. And then let's do the add UI components a button, which I think I'm just gonna steal this button from over here. Actually, let's steal this entire button from the UI main menu. So I'm just going to paste that in here. We're going to do that from here instead. Let's just go to the option menu and steal this back button as well. We want one of those. Where were we? UI game mode menu. So there. And let's see, we have a play button, we have a back button, we have a text input. We could probably try it now, except we need to enter this one from here. So here we're entering the UI option menu. Let's just copy what we're doing in there. Let's just copy this entire thing. I didn't copy enough. There, I just replaced it. I'm gonna call this play. This will go into the UI game mode menu. Currently, we don't have a lot of game modes to pick from. It's just gonna be the endless one. I think that we can at least enter and look at what that looks like now. And we could not, so there was something that I'm not adding. Going back here, vertical, all right, so we need to add the content container to this UI. Let's see, add UI component, content container. All right, let's see that again. Okay, so there you go. Currently, there's only this one, and I can enter text into it. Just gotta press back, go back in. So when you're first in here, you cannot type in this. If you press it, you can see this is getting lighter, the border, and then you can write things. Eventually, we're gonna wanna lock this to only be able to take numbers, but I don't think we have time for that today. So for today, I'm just gonna really trust that you enter only numbers. Otherwise, this will fail incredibly. Let's just use it in our endless game state. Let's put it in these settings for the endless game state. I'm going to give this a private int seed, and it takes that in here and says that this dot seed is equal to seed, and it's going to be a little sad at some places now, I bet. Like here is one, and I'm going to do integer dot parse int seed get. So that way we're using the seed that we have entered. So hopefully that's going to work, but there should be one more place where it is sad. So is that in the endless UI endless win menu? Yes. So settings, get seed. We didn't make a getter for it, so let's just real quick make that return seed. All right, so now it should be happy again. And if we give it 1, 2, 3, play. It's getting overwritten, isn't it? We're not using it in here yet. So I'm just gonna say this random is equal to a new random, and I'm gonna give it settings dot get seed. All right, let's try that again. Sorry that I'm a little stressed. It became such a long video, so. All right, now we got something different. That's great. So I'm just gonna try that out again. And let's give it a seed of 1. So this is what the seed of 1 looks like. And we have this, right? But finished, get to this high score menu. So let's play again. I'm gonna press 1 again. We get the exact same map. All right, I think that this will have to be enough. We have gone over 30 minutes, so now you can enter a seed. Currently, there are still some things that we'd need to do, such as some error checking maybe, and some filtering for only numbers and stuff like that. But as long as you trust your user, you now have a way of entering this value into your game. So that will be all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Hej då!